Okay, go ahead.
We are group number 3, and today we're going to be presenting about accreditation of healthcare organizations. I am Patrick Van Orden. I grew up in Blackfoot, Idaho, and I currently reside in Idaho Falls. Next in our group, we have Mauricio.
Hey everyone, name's Maurice, as Patrick introduced me. I am married, have 2 dogs, no kids, and live in California.
My name is Josh Black. I'm from Moses Lake, Washington, and I am a student here in Rexburg currently.
And I'm Megan Nelson, and I am living in Texas, the Dallas area, and that's where I am right now. I'm not married, and I'm happy to be here.
I'm Morgan. I'm originally from California, but my husband and I are going to school, and we're in Rexburg right now.
That's the group members of group number 3. And so, like I said, we're going to be covering accreditation of healthcare organizations. And in this presentation, we're going to cover 4 main topics. The first one is, what is accreditation? Then we're going to cover, is it mandatory or voluntary? We're going to compare the impact and the process of accreditation to that of board certification for physicians. And then what is the role of IOS, the International Organization of Standards, in the process? And so we'll go ahead and start with what is accreditation.
With what is accreditation, reference from achc.org. Accreditation is a process of review that healthcare organizations participate in to demonstrate the ability to meet determined criteria and standards of accreditation established by a professional accrediting agency. Accreditation represents agencies as credible and reputable organizations dedicated to ongoing and continuous compliance with the highest standard of quality. One of these is URAC, which we will see here in a future slide. With the 3 levels of accreditation, I'd like to use a specialty pharmacy as an example. First, full with resurvey. Every 3 years, it is shown that the facility meets requirements in all areas. Say for sake of example, a specialty pharmacy would require a clean room. This would be something that would be surveyed and would require to be finalized in order to receive accreditation. Second, interim meets standards in some areas, but not all, so improvement must be made. So for an example, would be with a clean room. A clean room consists of certain walls that need to be completely sealed, and if there happens to be a gap, then accreditation wouldn't meet the standard, so then there would need to be a second visit to ensure that that gap or that intrusion has been sealed or fixed. The third is denial. The facility does not meet accreditation requirements. Accreditation is denied. If a specialty pharmacy does not have a clean room, then it is denied an accreditation, as an example. Some requirements from URAC accrediting body are such as pharmacy services are evolving rapidly with increased scrutiny. Utilize URAC's industry leadership to demonstrate your commitment to safe patients' outcome that can help mitigate the economic and human cost of poor quality. Also establish a benchmark, standard, and goals to prove the quality of your pharmacy practice. And for 25 years, URAC's independence nonprofit status has been trusted by federal and state regulators, insurers, and providers to ensure quality and efficiency. And in doing so,
So the next question is accreditation mandatory? And the answer to that is that it is voluntary. Healthcare organizations, programs, and services voluntarily pursue accreditation. That's from jointcommission.org. CMS certification and licensure are required to receive funding from Medicaid and Medicare, but should not be confused with accreditation. That's something that in our research we were confused about at first. Being funded, well, receiving funding from the CMS is something that's completely different. However, if you are accredited by the Joint Commission, you receive what's called deemed status, and you can take care of Medicaid and Medicare patients. But the next slide is a little more specific on who it's voluntary for. It's voluntary for ambulatory surgery centers, clinical labs, critical access hospitals, home health agencies, hospitals, psychiatric hospitals, or if a hospital or clinic simply wishes to improve its services to patients wherever those patients come from, either locally or from further afield. Accreditation is required if you want to improve upon the services within your facility and make them top of the line. An analogy we kind of thought about is, for example, a missionary on their mission. There's a little activity in Preach My Gospel that's basically a survey where you find those areas where you may fall short and you work on those to improve. And that's kind of what accreditation is like, because they have people come in and do surveys, and like we talked about with the levels of accreditation, they're given a level, and if they need to improve, they know what they need to improve on to receive accreditation from the accrediting body.
And then next is the board certification for physicians. So while accreditation is for the specific organizations, the board certification for physicians is more specific for the doctors, and it demonstrates a physician's expertise in a particular specialty. And the doctors voluntarily meet additional standards beyond basic licensing. And it's not mandatory to practice medicine, but it is increasingly becoming prioritized by employers. And many insurance providers are also encouraging employers to hire physicians who are board certified, and just so that they can know that the physicians are updated with everything that they have to learn. And some of the requirements to be board certified, before a doctor can become board certified, they each must complete 4 years of pre-medical education in a college or university, a course of study leading to an MD or DO degree from a qualified medical school, and 3 to 5 years of full-time experience in an accredited residency training program. And when we did some research on how they become board certified, they do have to pass an exam administered by the member board in his or her specialty. And that's just the first step. And to maintain board certification, a doctor must actively keep pace with the latest advances in his or her specialty and demonstrate best practices for patient safety and communications and ethics. So they just stay on top of it, and they have to be certified.
Okay, so the next thing we wanted to talk about was the role of the IOS in the accreditation process. The IOS is the International Organization for Standardization, and it is the largest developer of voluntary international standards. International standard is given of state-of-the-art specification for products, services, good practice, helping to make the industry more efficient and effective. Developed through global consensus, they break down barriers to international trade. So the IOS does a lot of different certifications all over the world, not just in hospitals. They were founded in 1947 and have created more than 19,000 international standards that span technology and business regulations and agricultural standards. So the iOS 9001 is typically what we see hospitals using. It is designed to be applicable to any group, no matter the size or service the group provides. So that means any organization, not just hospitals. The iOS 9001:2015 specifies requirements for a quality management system when an organization needs to demonstrate its ability to consistently provide products and services that meet customer and applicable statutory and regulatory requirements, and aim to enhance customer satisfaction through the effective application of systems, including procession for the improvement of the system and assurance of conformity to the customer and applicable statutory and regulatory requirements. So the iOS 9001 is not necessarily just for a hospital. It doesn't go into things like clean rooms like we discussed earlier, or things like that. It's more the business side of things, like are they accounting for things well? Are they actually using the things that they buy? Are they not just being wasted? Things like that, and improving that side of a hospital rather than the like, is everything clean and is the hospital's standard of care where it needs to be. It's talking about the business side of it.
Okay, so in conclusion, the 4 topics we went over was accreditation is a process that hospitals and other organizations do to establish themselves as a credible resource for the services they provide. Those 3 levels again were full, interim, and denial. Accreditation is not mandatory, but it certifies that your facility meets applicable standards for the accrediting body. Board certification for physicians certify the physician's ability to practice a particular specialty, but is not mandatory either. IOS is an international accrediting body that generally focuses on the business side of the hospital functions. We hope you enjoyed learning about our slide and about accrediting in healthcare organizations.
Great, thank you guys for that. That was a great presentation. You did an excellent job. I'm just going to start asking you some questions. I'll start from the left, so Joshua, and then I'll work my way across the screen. Just ask you the same question. It's pretty simple. I ask everybody these questions, but when you were learning about the accrediting bodies and more specifically ISO, what surprised you, or what was something that that you just didn't expect to learn when you were studying?
Well, I was surprised with the ISO that, like, well, for example, with the Joint Commission is a lot more about the actual services and the facilities, and the ISO is mainly, from what we read, business and just like good business practices that meet those standards. So I thought the accrediting bodies might all kind of be geared towards the same things, like just the quality of services, but I guess they're not, is kind of what I learned about the ISO.
Right. Was anybody surprised that they're abbreviated ISO, but the words actually are iOS?
Yeah.
Yeah,
That was funny.
it always confuses me.
Yeah, they actually used to be called. I can't remember the exact name of what they used to be called, but I believe it was in that order, iOS, and so, or sorry, ISO, and then they just decided to keep ISO instead of switching it for their new name change.
Mm.
When I learned that too, I was like, no, that's iOS, but it's kind of funny. So.
Yeah.
All right, Mauricio, same question.
What caught my attention was the ISO created more than 19,000 international standards, and it expands to not only technology, business regulations, and agricultural standards. And I found that really interesting just because it's such a broad spectrum that it doesn't specifically narrow down just on one specialty, but encompasses everything.
Great. Megan?
Yeah, I thought that was really interesting. One thing that I thought was really interesting when we were putting this together was just the difference. I didn't know what accreditation was of facilities or the certification of the board for the physicians, and just learning about the differences between those and how like important it is to stay updated with that and how accreditation can make the facilities a lot better and make sure that they're following all the all the processes that they need to do. That's something that I thought was really interesting, is just learning more about how those things help in healthcare.
Great. Morgan?
I thought it was interesting that some hospitals would choose the ISO over Joint Commission. I was trying to find information on like how many hospitals in the U.S. use the ISO, but I couldn't find it. But it was just interesting because, like, I know in one of the readings it said that the Joint Commission did the majority of the hospitals in the United States. But it sounds like it's, like, I guess more competitive. So it would be, in my opinion, to be more beneficial to have a Joint Commission accreditation rather than ISO. But at the same time, if you couldn't, as a hospital, if you couldn't achieve Joint Commission, like if you got like interim or denial, then it'd probably be better to like have an ISO accreditation rather than no accreditation. And it was interesting that even though they had, like the ISO had so many international standards, like we were talking about the 19,000, that they don't have one that's a little bit more specific to hospitals. At least that's what it seemed like. Like my research, it didn't seem like our research didn't seem like they had anything that was more specific, or at least not to United States hospitals. So.
Yeah, that's with the Joint Commission. I don't believe this is I don't believe it's the same in ISO. But with, you guys mentioned in the Joint Commission you have that deemed status for CMS patients. I don't believe you have that with ISO, where they are accredited on different things. So, I mean, it's definitely beneficial to have that Joint Commission, because you're essentially killing two birds with one stone. You don't have to have maybe you have that deemed status. So, great. That's something that I learned as well. Patrick.
I could just echo a lot of what everybody else mentioned too, but I think just generally learning about what ISO is, or and then the whole accreditation process, and just learning that when it started, it started 1947 and holds true today, and how it's grown and it's international, and everything that it provides for these different facilities. It says that it's applicable to no matter what size the facility is, either if it's small or large, so everybody can benefit from it or can use it. So just generally just learning about it, something that I never really had any idea about.
Right. Well, thank you guys. I'm going to go ahead and stop the broadcast now real quick.